The most radical thing we can ever do, you all, is to actually love people.
So, I know what you're thinking. Isn't this a dating and relationships channel? What does love have to do with politics? And the answer is everything. Everything. So if you follow progressive politics, welcome to my channel, comrade. I do usually give dating advice, so if you're into that, hit subscribe. If you don't closely follow progressive politics, don't click away. Because today I want to talk about an election that not only reflects a lot of the overarching dynamics in US politics right now, but also has a whole lot to teach us about love. Let's get into it. So I was born and raised in the beautiful city of Chicago. And on Tuesday, after months of organizing, we elected Brandon Johnson as our next mayor. Now, Brandon is a great representation of real progressive politics in the US right now. His platform included affordable housing, accessible healthcare, reinvesting in our public schools, and so much more. His opponent, on the other hand, Paul Vallas, is a very ugly but accurate representation of what many call the neoliberal establishment. Basically, this guy was running as a Democrat, although his campaign was funded by both moderate Democrats and extreme Trump-affiliated Republicans. Now, the cornerstone of his campaign was not public schools or healthcare, but instead it was all about cops.
Crime is out of control, and combative leadership is failing us.
Paul Vallas will put crime and your safety first.
Put more police on our streets and public transportation.
Paul Vallas, crime and your safety is his top priority.
Now, the cop-loving Democrat is unfortunately a major political force in the US right now. Despite rampant police brutality and the uprising that followed the murder of George Floyd, moderate Democrats, and of course the entire Republican Party, still seem to think that cops are the end-all be-all of public safety in this country. And before we go any further into a conversation about love and politics, let's get one thing straight. More cops does not equal safer communities. And there is extensive research to prove this, but just as an example, let's briefly talk about Chicago. The Chicago Police Department currently has a $2 billion budget. Their wallet is looking pretty damn fat compared to other more trivial things like infrastructure, public transit, community services. Who needs it? So given all of this money that we're throwing at the police, our city must be really safe, right?
Shootings up more than 50% since 2019. Carjackings up 300%.
Even though police budgets have never been higher, our city is still incredibly unsafe. Wait, so if public safety doesn't look like more cops, I mean, what does it look like? Well, it looks a lot like a rich suburb. I think most of us would agree that an affluent suburb is one of the safest places to live in the United States. Now, think about it. Are wealthy suburbs safe because they have cop cars lurking at every corner, surveying people 24/7? No. Absolutely not. What rich suburbs do have is robust after-school programming for their kids. They have access to housing and beautiful green spaces. And when someone in the family struggles with drug addiction or mental illness, they get a doctor, not a prison sentence. So if we know all that stuff works to keep communities safe, why don't our inner cities look more like wealthy suburbs? The answer is institutionalized racism, centuries of it, and classism as well. Basically, when it comes to communities of color or poor communities, our leaders have decided that public money is best spent not on investing in the people of that community, but rather on policing, surveillance, and incarceration. Make no mistake, that is what hateful governance looks like. But that's where the progressive movement comes in. Progressives like Brandon Johnson understand that educating people, housing people, and investing in people is an institutionalized form of love. As a society, we need to start understanding that love is not just interpersonal. It's not just relationships between friends, family, partners. Rather, love is something that can be built into the very fabric of how our society functions. So, what does institutionalized love look like? It looks like access to quality education for everyone. It looks like public transit that actually works, and housing that people can actually afford, and universal health care, and not just a living wage for everyone, but a thriving wage for everyone. And as Brandon so aptly said in his victory speech, we can have all of this because we live in one of the richest cities,
in one of the wealthiest nations, at the richest time in the history of the world.
So don't you dare tell me that there isn't enough to go around. Love isn't just found in the end game of the progressive movement, it's also the fuel of the progressive movement. Over these past months campaigning for Brandon, I have seen love everywhere. Love looks like knocking doors in 17-degree weather or giving an elderly neighbor a ride to the polls. It looks like radical empathy and fighting for communities that might not even be your own. And most importantly, it looks like collective, unified action. At Brandon's victory party, I looked around and saw a gorgeous, diverse coalition of all ages, all races, all income levels, and I just thought, wow, it is so amazing what we accomplished in solidarity with one another. And when you knock on doors, like I might go out for 2 hours and talk to maybe 3 people who I swayed into voting for Brandon, but you multiply that by the 15 people that were canvassing the neighborhood that day. You multiply that by the 50 different wards in Chicago, and suddenly you have 2,250 new supporters. Now you multiply that by months and even years of work, and now you have a movement. The election of Brandon Johnson, who, by the way, was polling at just 2% a couple months ago, is undeniable proof that when we move together in love and solidarity, when we collectively reject the racist notion that some communities deserve investment while other communities deserve policing and surveillance, that's when we win. So make no mistake that love is political. And if you consider yourself a truly loving, empathetic person, not only do you have a place in the progressive movement, we need you in the progressive movement. Because electing people like Brandon Johnson is just the beginning. And as Brandon says early and often, we've got a lot of work to do. This channel is usually for feminist dating advice for all genders, so if you're about that, hit subscribe and then go join a local progressive org. Bye, thotties!